Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Shares with Cayman, where we add value to people's lives happening every day on ebizradio.com at 12 o'clock. For our lunchtime marketing segment, our very own resident genius, marketing and communications expert, Craig Pagely. How are you doing, Craig?
Yeah, Kevin, I'm well, thanks. Yeah, just sitting isolated again. As you know, we're all in lockdown, back to phase 4, stage 4, whatever we reference these days, level 4.
How does it affect you? Do you kind of get into a bit of a slump, or do you kind of go, yeah, just get on with it? What is your?
That's a good question, Kevin. No, it doesn't affect me. Yeah, I can sit in front of this machine for 12 hours. I do need to get up and have tea and coffee and all the rest now and then. But I must admit, when you're in a long run of working from home, I do feel that I need to break it and go to the likes of a WeWork office and things like that, just to get the change of environment. And as much as WeWork, people are scared about the spread effect in those collective workspaces, they're incredibly well managed, and it's just great to be around other people, see visual contact. Yes, you're working with your masks on and things like that, but there's music, there's great coffees, there's energy, and so when I do feel that I might have a bit of a slump, then I'll extract myself from the home environment and head off to WeWork and just get energized there again.
Yeah, no, for me, I've just got to a point where because I've just heard again someone that I've actually worked with in the last 12 to 16 months, 18 months, who's passed away from COVID.
Oh, gosh.
And another house, well, he wasn't a house friend of mine, but a friend of a friend who's also, so I knew him personally. He's probably 2 or 3 years older than me, also passed away from COVID yesterday.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so I'm as much as I'm fine with working at home, and that when you have that consistent niggling about people just dying and people dying, and I think it's really bad for people's mental health. I'm such an advocate to keeping yourself mentally healthy and doing whatever that means in whatever capacity, but I'm seeing it, how people are just dying, and how it's like there's just nothing we can do about it. It's almost like your hands have been cut off. People are fine and they functioning.
An interesting statement. Nothing we can do about it. Unfortunately, with the status that we're faced with in South Africa, there is nothing we can do about it, because the government don't really give a toss about us. They if they stopped stealing and actually use the money to buy more vaccines and vaccinate the nation, we'd be in a much better situation. And I blame it wholly on government. And obviously that's only for people who want to be vaccinated. There are a whole host of others who have the right not to be, but whatever the consequences there are, that's for another discussion. But we're really in a sad situation in South Africa, and it's an embarrassment. It's a real embarrassment.
Do you know, Greg, also what from a resilience perspective, what was notable about South Africans in the last 10, 15, 20 years is we work, we get things done, we like taking action, right? What's sort of permeating into this environment is how much we will tolerate. We will tolerate just about anything that happens to this country. Like it's such a small minority of people that are actually doing something about it or changing it or leaving. But the general population of South Africa will tolerate just about anything that government puts out there. And it's sad. It's sad to know that we kind of go, okay, well, what must we do? What must we do? What must we? And we don't even have, as humans, it's almost a human rights violation. Like as humans, we don't have an option to do anything.
Yeah, I often state that government should actually be tried in the same ways as crimes against humanity, because really in South Africa in the last let's just call it the last decade and a half alone. Look at the devastation that's come about in this country on the back of stolen tax money, misappropriation of funds and things like that. And it's just totally unacceptable. And it's not about you and me, Kevin. It's about every other person in this country, particularly at the poorer level. It's inexcusable, and it's not going to change. That's the sad reality.
Yeah. And yeah, it's laughable. Like when you think of it, it's like, wow, like this is what we willingly sit up with, and we don't really have many choices available to us. But to shift gear into the choices we do have, like
yes.
you and I doing what we do, we just had a fantastic conversation with some inspiring, called the brand mama. She's the brand CMO from Hollard Insurance, Hayley Brower. What an inspiring conversation, Craig. You know, speaking to all of that we just spoke about to this, you kind of go, you know, even in the face of all of it, there are brands out there like Hollard kicking ass in a big way and putting brands out there and helping people and influencing brands and making things happen in smaller brands' lives to such a degree that, I mean, one of her words was one of the guys had opened his franchise and opened 3 franchises because of the support that they gave him. What an amazing sort of conversation we had.
Yeah, Kevin, absolutely insightful, and the way it's impacted on you and I'm damn sure it really made a lot of our listeners stop and think about what their own organizations are doing or could be doing to help small businesses and give them a sort of a hand up during these particular times. And it is, so as much as we feel the pressures of government non-delivery, the resilience that South Africans have is just something unmatched as well. We really are a resourceful, resilient, collective, communicative bunch that actually we do want each other to succeed and
yeah.
You know, that at the end of the day, irrespective of what level of society and layer you come from, there is a unanimous collective wanting for the same thing, and that is for us as a collective nation to move forward and succeed. And you know, these programs are definitely evidences, and yeah, fortunately there are organizations that are in positions that can act to enable these kinds of programs.
Yeah. I mean, on that note, Craig, don't you want to sort of give us a bit of a recap of everything we spoke about? Because for those who have missed it, guys, if you missed last week's conversation, I would go back and go and check it out online. If you check it out on social medias, it is there. Big ads for small businesses, and so definitely go and check it out. But Craig, don't you want to give us that feedback?
Perfect. Yeah, great, Kevin. So as a quick intro, and for those who missed the show, Hollard Insurance launched their innovative Big Ads for Small Business campaign to share its big advertising space with 12 small businesses over a 6-month period. And Kevin, as we spoke about, the aim of the campaign was to give these small businesses a foot up by gaining exposure across all of Hollard's various media channels so that they can succeed and bring value not only to themselves, but most importantly to the broader communities that they serve as well. The campaign was launched late February 2021, gosh, I'm tongue-tied here, and utilized not only the existing paid media platforms that Hollard currently utilize, but Hollard actually went and purchased a whole host of other media assets to leverage the campaign. So a couple of great takeouts for me from that conversation, Kevin. The first one, probably the most important, as it points to what I believe is a rich culture that's embedded in Hollard's business, and it's the statement around always starts at home. And Hayley spoke so clearly about the purposeful intent that the people are the core of your business. And Kevin, this plays into what you spoke about the week before as well. So irrespective of the level that staff are in an organization, participation and feeling a sense of belonging and contributing to the bigger picture is vitally important to ensure that emotional connection and buy-in across any of the organizations. And Hollard have obviously enabled that in their business. And what they've actually done is, through that, they've enabled their staff to be catalysts for positive and enduring change, and because they invited them in to actually nominate some of these businesses that ended up being selected on their campaign. Another important statement that Hayley made, Kevin, is open source your innovation and creative thinking. Don't think that it's only something that the executive team or agency partners get involved in. It's absolutely something that can and should exist across all levels of the organization. Always have a how-to guide when implementing new ideas, strategies, or programs. And that way, anyone across the organization will at any one point in time know how to support the initiatives and know where the initiative is and what it actually means to the organization. So yeah, for me, a really good guide on ensuring that you move the business forward with collective buy-in. Some of the other key learnings, they put online, this was quite interesting. They put online the things that they do or have been doing in real life, warts and all, when in the work from home environment. So in this particular environment now, if the kid's screaming in the background, you just have to stop and deal with it, and you manage the real life situations in that instance. Leverage good relationships and connections, both at a personal vis-a-vis internal level and at a business vis-a-vis external level, because really when you keep it tight and connected in real life, that plays out for positivity in your business environment as well. They also applied the principles of Nancy Klein's The Thinking Environment, which was about creating space to think and get better results more of the time. And I actually want to touch on that later on in our conversation today. And this is a really exciting piece. So Hollard has a brand recipe book with purpose being the foundation layer of the cake. And really, absolutely every single organization should have their own brand recipe book. The ingredients will be different from one person to the next, but at the end of the day, it's a guiding platform on how you create your cake layer by layer. And then when you know who you are and you know what you are, you'll absolutely know what to do. And yeah, the final points on the bits of wisdom that Hedy share, 4 key concepts that she applies with her team. It's insistent, persistent, consistent, and relentless. And then lovely term of phrases, repeat and then repeat again.
Yeah, Craig, I listened to the conversation again, and some of the things that you mentioned, it's just really amazing brain to come up with this stuff. But what I'm intrigued is going from that conversation to where our next conversation is, because you always build it into a flow, a wonderful flow. So guys, if you do follow the show, you'll see that Craig often connects all these dots, and sometimes we start in a random place, but we always end up in a good space and understanding why we're talking about it.
Yeah, so absolutely, Kevin. There's a bull today, but this time definitely with a slight twist, because I want to cover a few topics, and the reason being is we were going to have one big focus today, but we're going to push that through to next week, where we're going to spend some time hopefully with one of the industries and businesses that Hedy's business gave exposure to. So I thought to mix it up a bit today, but actually every single one of the points that we're talking about really address last week's conversation and pick up from a different angle. So the topics that I want to quickly touch on today are, I want to share the broad principles of Nancy Klein's The Thinking Environment. It's a really great platform, and I think our listeners would get substantial benefit from understanding what it means and how to apply it, because it's got some value not just for the work environment, but for personal life as well. Then I want to share how, going from the thinking environment, how Toyota Corporation fostered a culture of participation and innovation, which led to new product innovation. And then I want to address a recent article on the impact of COVID on small business in South Africa. And this is a direct build on the Hollard Insurance discussion last week, because there definitely is a bigger role that bigger brands can play for small business in South Africa, particularly when we get to see some of the stats that have come about. And then a little segue into an interesting article that I read regarding the pressure that consumers are under from companies and brands with relentless barrage of emails and comms being sent during COVID.
So it sounds like a fascinating session today, Craig.
Yeah, so let me jump into the first topic. And for those that don't know, Nancy Klein is a published author and public speaker and foundation and president of an amazing business called Time to Think. It's a business that she developed around the thinking environment philosophy. And yeah, Nancy also delivers the Time to Think courses and leads the Time to Think faculty. So Time to Think, Kevin, I didn't realize this, but it actually began back in 1984 and grew out of Nancy's consulting and teaching work that she was doing near Washington, D.C., where Nancy served as the founding director of the Thornton Friends School, where she was in position for 12 years as director of the Leadership Institute. She was in position there for 12 years, and then as a director of the Leadership Institute for the next 6 years. Nancy's also a visiting lecturer to the Henley Business School in the UK.
Wow.
So, yeah, quite a good accolade or two in place there. And I genuinely did not know it went back as far as 84. So the fact that it still has absolute relevance today means that this lady has really got some profound thinking in place. So quoting from the timetothinc.com website, Nancy's whole premise is that the quality of everything we do depends on the quality of thinking we do first. The quality of our thinking depends on the way we treat each other while we are thinking.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's just
okay, hang on. We just say that one line.
Yeah, let me read that again, because it's been such a profound piece of learning for me, doing some deep dive. I know the principles, but I didn't understand the construct of what sort of led to those principles. So here we are.
Yeah.
The quality of everything we do depends on the quality of thinking we do first. The quality of our thinking depends on the way we treat each other while we are thinking.
She's like,
yeah.
I'm going to steal that and I'm going to share it with everybody I can.
Absolutely. And what's really cool here is while the components are incredibly powerful individually, Kevin, just imagine when applying all 10 of these and those working together in an organization, imagine the transformation impact that will have on business.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So let me give you a heads up on the 10. The 10 components of thinking environments are defined as follows. Attention, listening with palpable respect and without interruption. Inclusive questions, removing assumptions that limit our ability to think for ourselves clearly and creatively. Erase, offering freedom of internal rush or urgency. Appreciation, offering genuine acknowledgement of a person's qualities. Encouragement, giving courage to go to the cutting edge of ideas by moving beyond internal competition. Equality, teaching each other as thinking peers, giving equal turns and attention. Feelings, allowing sufficient emotional release to restore thinking. Information, supplying the facts, dismantling denial. Diversity, welcoming divergent thinking and diverse group identities. And finally, place, creating a physical environment that says back to people, you matter.
Craig, you know what I find interesting is that, like you're saying, back to 1984, right? She's been working with us, and like diversity, welcoming divergent thinking and diverse groups in identity. There's actually stats to prove that when a company is more diverse in their approach, but also within their people, that the company functions better. Company has more success.
Yeah.
So the fact that this goes back so far back, it's really, really amazing. But I absolutely love this.
The great principles, and it's one of those. Every business should have a poster of that in their organization or on their desktop, just as a reminder each time you're going into engagement with your peers and colleagues. Whether it's through Zoom, Teams, whatever it may be, just as an enablement to this digital platform needs to be treated in the same way to ensure that it brings about the opportunity of a thinking environment.
But even going into, I think as a general rule, you could actually use this as and I'm so glad that she mentions this as part of the cake recipe, with Haiti saying, this is part of their cake recipe and this is how they follow based on these 10 components. Because I think it really, looking at it now, it takes into consideration almost anything that would potentially happen within an environment. And if you can follow that or consider these as rules, you're suddenly putting yourself in the winner's seat. You set yourself up for success, right?
Absolutely. That's nicely said, because that's what it is at the end of the day. If you can put all the energy and effort into enabling a platform where those can contribute in a very different way that leads to success, God, why shouldn't you be doing it?
Yeah. So
building on from that positivity, Kevin, I really want to now look at the Toyota Motor Corporation, because what they've done is they've enabled and entrenched a foundation to their business and their culture for many decades, where they've enabled this aspect of free thinking within the organization. And what was really interesting, I came across 2 articles from 2 very different timestamps, and there was a nice build on the content, and I'll start with that. So firstly, referencing an online version of Toyota UK's magazine as published by Joe Clifford in 2014, Joe describes the program that I reference in details as follows. Toyota's desire to put the customer first and achieve the highest level of quality in vehicle production has been a company-wide philosophy from day one. A program called Statistical Quality Control was introduced as early as, take this, 1949, and in 1951 was expanded to include the new concept called Toyota Creative Idea and Suggested System, TCISS. And it's the purpose of TCISS that was to empower every employee to participate in improving, predominantly at that point, Kevin, product quality by inviting them to make informed suggestions on way to improve the production process. Now, interesting, previously it had only been the privilege of upper management to make suggestions in that respect, but it was now open to include all employees at the sharp end of production, and arguably they are the ones that had the highest potential to contribute, because they actually were on the floor getting to understand where some of the production and quality issues were being tripped up on. So extra motivation was incorporated into the system with the establishment of an individual annual award to honor these excellent suggestions. And today it's split up into gold, silver, and bronze medals, much like the Olympics, and Olympics in Japan possibly being in question. However, the real value of the system was that it provided motivation to employees by focusing on their skills and creativity. So the slogan of good thinking, good products was solicited by their in-house TCISS contest in 1953, and it still appears as highly visible in every single Toyota factory across the globe. Now, what's great about the program, Kevin, is I personally have seen evidence of this, because a really good friend of mine, going back to 2000, he worked for Toyota Motor Corporation for many years, and he actually proposed a system improvement program via the Toyota Creative Idea and Suggestion System. And his project suggestion was identified as a key project that would benefit TMC worldwide. And as such, he was given the opportunity of actually going to Japan to present his ideas. And, as they say, the rest is history. And his program was then developed with the assistance of a designated team in Japan at head office, and today is still a documented process of operations for TMC worldwide.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just, because recently I was looking at sharing some information with a potential client, and I was actually looking at a recent article that Oracle actually shared, which they refer to the future of work is now. And one of the critical points that they mention is adopting AI and forward-looking data to turn teams into super teams. So, when Oracle's kind of looking at that, and you kind of look, that's one of the perspectives that they already have. You're kind of going, the world is really getting on board with a new kind of thinking and the way that they're actually doing it, and adopting AI in your teams to actually create a super team. I think that is really, as they say in the actual article, that is the future of work. So it's really, just the concept of what you're sharing today around thinking and your thinking environment and the way that you do that. That's quite interesting. That's an interesting point. So how did Toyota actually achieve all of this that you mentioned?
Yeah, Kevin, just before I jump onto that, I like the point you talk about the Oracle and the AI. What would be really interesting is to understand if one took Nancy Klein's 10 principles of the thinking environment and so, how do you build that into AI? How do you let the algorithms understand what the triggers are to ensure that those 10 principles are actually set in place or encouraged or adhered to during the process of using algorithms and forward thinking to build a super team? That would be quite interesting.
Craig, I'll give you a practical example, right? Like, I don't know if you know Grammarly.
Yes, absolutely.
So when you're using Grammarly, and if you're using Gmail, Grammarly, if you have it sort of as embedded into your actual Chrome,
yes,
as you're typing an email, Grammarly will show you whether it's got a happy face, a bad face, or a sad face, or whatever. So the AI literally tells you whether the information you're sharing is what kind of feeling the person reading it is going to get from the words you're using. It's a simple kind of analogy, but in terms of just that, AI is already influencing how we could actually communicate with each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we do, use all these principles and sort of have a Grammarly approach to it, and it sort of picks up, what are you saying and how are you doing it more effectively, or what could you be doing or saying? Like, I think AI is, it's gonna create super teams at the end, and that's the future we're looking forward to, I think.
I love the notion of AI. The one thing I do question often is who's the moderator.
Yeah.
They definitely, it has to come back to ground level somewhere in the equation, and there needs to be a moderator, because as much as we're working with principles and open-minded thinking and all of those things, which direction are you theoretically pushing people into versus putting the construct there for free thinking to come back to a point that you decide on and you drive into that environment. So yeah, the moderating aspect of AI is still something that I'd love to understand more about, nevertheless. But going back to your good question there, Kevin, the principles of their creative idea suggestion system actually, interestingly, came out of a similar initiative that was already in place at Ford Motor Corporation in the USA in the early 50s. So, we know how the East and West emulate each other's business practices and products, and that, and going back all the way to the 40s and 50s. So what's key to note, though, Kevin, here is that Toyota evolved the principles of the program over the last few decades, but they never ever changed the principle of the program nor its intent. So the program announcements and launch material asked workers for their ideas and was structured to address the following. There's about 6 or 7 key points. So the first thing there is they spoke about why we're asking for creative ideas. They then spoke about what type of ideas the TMC are looking for. And then they spoke about who can actually submit the ideas, how to submit the ideas, how will the ideas be evaluated, and what happens if an idea is accepted. So I'll just give an example about four of those to reframe them. So why are we asking for your creative idea questions actually gave context to focusing on reducing the cost and improving quality and eliminating waste. And that was a single-minded approach at that particular point in time. The who can submit idea question gave reassurance that all ideas will be considered, and that the supposed ignored ideas of such systems that were in place elsewhere will actually be reviewed upon for consideration. And any organization who implements programs of this nature, there's a lot of skepticism that a great idea may be overlooked because it's not from this team or from that person or something like that. But they gave a reassurance that anybody across all levels of the organization submitting an idea would have consideration. And then very simply, the how do we submit ideas question, simply stated, put it in the box, and it specified where the suggestion boxes were placed around the organization, from head office to all production facilities around the world. But interestingly, again, they're expanding on the how we submit ideas. The notification included 3 important points, Kevin, which helped encourage the employees in this way. It stated, if you can't write it yourself, it's okay to have a shop floor engineer help you. We accept verbal suggestions. And the third point, there's no need to gain your manager's permission before making a suggestion. So it took away a lot of that internal angst and fear that some employees have. And it just put it out there that it was there for anyone and everyone to participate in. And the closing point on the topic, and something that I really agree with, Kevin, is the Toyota document states that if the suggestion or creative idea was one that would normally have been expected in the course of work, then that idea wouldn't be considered for the program unless it was absolutely exceptional. So in other words, don't ask for a reward for doing your job. And really that is something that's absolutely landed for me. And I think it's a message that landed with the staff, because the TCISS system is 70 years old and still going strong, Kevin. And the one thing I just, particularly in the last 10 years, there've been so many organizations and staff and employees that are just going, pushing it a bit extra. I must be rewarded differently. Doing this, I must be rewarded a bit differently. But actually, when you look at the expanse of job descriptions these days and what's expected in it, we're expected to push the boundaries, and you get paid your salary for that.
Yeah, Craig, what's interesting is that it's, I think we've had this conversation on the show before, is if we are not at a capacity yet, at a mind frame of what is the differentiator that I am offering in my job, in this environment, as a brand, in my sales, as a coach, as an executive, if I'm not approaching this from what is the actual differentiator, how do I differentiate myself? The people who are doing that and the people who are taking that like that sort of a stance are leading the way, like by miles, right? So, like rightfully said, you can't be rewarded just for doing your job. Like
you don't get paid just to show up. Exactly that. It's you got to put in a bit of hard mile to really demonstrate your value.
So Craig, going back to small business topic, you mentioned earlier that what pressures these businesses have been under the sort of COVID-19 lockdown, my business being one of these, and what can you share with us regarding the impact of small business in South Africa?
Yeah, Kevin. So while the intention is not to move the conversation back into a negative space, it's really about just putting some facts in place so that we all understand the severity and challenge that small businesses are going through, and what the direct impact is on people, particularly the people within those businesses. So, interesting article that I came across titled "Quarter of Small Businesses Closed Because of COVID-19 Survey." It was published on the timeslive.co.za blog and published by journalist Ernest Mabuza on the 26th of March this year. And we learned from this article, the Beyond COVID Business Survey, which was covered in the article, that 26% of SMMEs reported being forced to close their doors, with 7% of them permanently closing last year, Kevin. Honestly, I think the figure would probably be a much, much higher number, because we know that in this country, there are many businesses that aren't registered and that operate under the radar, both from a tax point of view, from whatever reason, trying to bypass the huge operating costs of registered employees and things like that. So I think the net impact is far greater than the percentages share.
Yeah.
But just to set some context there, Kevin, Red Flank, which is a specialist management consultancy, they launched a divisional company called Beyond COVID in August last year. And it's this entity that conducted the survey that Ernest references in the article. And The survey was conducted between July 2020 and March 2021, so absolutely current in its findings. And it covered nearly 4,500 companies across all sizes, but interestingly, 58% or 56% of the companies that participated in the survey were micro-employers, or those employing 10 or fewer staff, and small businesses, those with 11 to 50 staff. What Ernest noted in the article is that a further 26% of SMMEs are reportedly going to close their doors as a direct result of COVID in its current guise, and that there are a chance of that a collective of 1.2 staff could be laid off per business over the next 6 months.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, Kevin, the sad truth is about 7% of these SMMEs are going to close permanently. So the groundswell of the negative impact, just seeing a bit of light coming through now into this next round of hard lockdown, we're really seeing that the pressure these folk are under. What's shocking to learn, though, Kevin, is that 21% of the businesses polled were actually closed already. And you know, the owners having the grace to participate in the survey and at least hope that some of those findings would lead to something positive downstream. 64% of those expected that they would not reopen.
Sure.
Yeah. The survey also established that small businesses, take note of this, are 26 times more likely to close than their corporate counterparts. 26 times more likely, Kevin. And very worrying fact, because one would hopefully see more of the corporate brands stepping in to assist, like the likes of Hollard Insurance. And I don't think corporate brands at the mid to upper size level realize the higher chances of survival that they have, to the extent of 26 times to those of the smaller businesses around them. And again, another really sobering number here is that the SMMEs will require 1.1 trillion rand in relief funding if they have any hope of staying open into the next 12 months, Kevin. This is a far cry from 44% of big corporates that have indicated that they have returned to, take note, business as usual since the beginning of this year. Yeah, and you can just see the inequalities of an SME and the challenges they're faced with versus well-structured corporate organizations in South Africa. The survey also found that while large and small businesses were equally at risk of closure at the start of the lockdown a year ago, SMEs are now more likely, again, 26 times to close down. And for those that manage to survive, they expect to retrench an average of 13% of their staff, or 1.2 million people over the next 6 months. That against 5% expected retrenchments for the corporates. 13% at the SMME versus 5% at the corporate level. Now, interestingly, yesterday afternoon on the radio, there was an update on the statistics around unemployment in South Africa due to COVID, and it was something like 505 or 507,000 jobs lost on the back of COVID in our economy. And just when we thought we'd see the light of day again coming through, this next hard lockdown is going to have dire consequences. The findings also showed that 54% of businesses said they were currently operating below capacity, and this is particularly in the construction, accommodation, food and manufacturing and IT sectors, they being the worst affected, whereas the public sector, healthcare and financial services are definitely the most least affected. And the findings showed that businesses expected to recover pre-COVID would take at least 6 months longer now than in the pre-COVID expectations. So, pre this current lockdown, they thought it would take about 3 years to get to full recovery. The second blip that's now being experienced probably going to add another 6 months to the recovery timeline, Kevin. So in closing on the topic, Faye Mukadam, who is the chairperson of Beyond COVID, the enablers of the survey, said, the results of the survey highlighted the challenge facing business across sectors. Faye has further prompted Beyond COVID to fine-tune its focus to help revive the hard-hit SMME sector as a way to stimulate job creation and contribute to the country's overall economy, recovery. And I think organizations like this could really work well with the likes of the Hollards, where they could take the findings and at the real detailed level of where the pain points are, see how big business can come in and help those smaller businesses address those particular needs, and hopefully help move them along in the right direction.
Yeah, Craig, on the leadership show that we've recently showcased, we had the head of innovation from Old Mutual speak to us about leadership. And he's in a position of leadership. So he's the head of innovation at Old Mutual, and he was saying, leadership today, we can't just be sitting back and kind of going, oh well, I am in this wonderful position. So what he went and did is he started a whole new business called Super Skills for the average guy on the street. Who can, do random kind of extra skills. So someone who can cut hair and someone who can mow the lawn, someone, and he's created a portal for you to sort of register yourself and say, well, I've got extra skills. This is what I can do. But this is someone who's in a position who doesn't need to be doing this.
Yes.
And literally started an entire brand on its own, fully functioning to support the skill loss that we've experienced because of COVID. But I think that's the kind of thing that we need to start thinking about. That's what South Africans really need to start considering, is like, yeah, I have a day job, and what is the second thing that I do? Not purely because the government isn't that great, but you don't know how many more lives you're going to be impacting. And what outcome that's going to, so I think it's a brain shift that we really need to do to really support where we were at because of COVID.
Totally. I think that also goes back to that resourcefulness conversation we had, or at least topic. I just, are there enough forums that are bringing these kinds of ideas to the table? Are there enough platforms for this open source thinking to create opportunities, to connect people, to help change the game on the ground?
Yeah, and I think that's a relevant point. I don't think there is. I think there's too little, and not enough people know about it, because there are some mighty brainy people out there that if we just connected the dots somehow, we could actually, and that's really an aim of what we're doing, right? Like speaking about it and having conversation around it. But Craig, I mean, you also mentioned the pressure that brands were placing on staff and consumers alike due to the COVID pandemic. What can you reveal in this regard?
Yeah, Kevin, just so, well, whilst we know that there's a lot of pressure being placed on small business owners all around the world, we also know that the working from home set and general consumers alike are definitely feeling pressure from COVID and being placed under these other undue pressures on the back of the pandemic. But there was a really interesting read from an article entitled "Email Burnout: Consumers Stretched by Having to Reply to Emails and Clean Out Their Inbox." This was published by Ray Schultz a week ago on the Marketing Daily blog from mediapost.com, where he starts by reminding us that there is much conversation on the negative impact of social media on all of us, but actually email is an equally bad habit-forming channel, and I agree with that. And as much as email is probably one of the most effective B2B channels, and the dark marketing platform is really a phenomenal platform. During these extra layers of pressure, the times where we've got extra layers of pressure, we really are needing to manage our email behavior. So it's highlighted in a study conducted by Task Husky, which is an innovative web studio based in Michigan, and they focus on delivering exceptional service to e-com store owners on the Shopify and Shopify Plus platforms, which we've spoken about previously. And their survey was conducted across 2,342 US consumers in April this year. And the study revealed the following, Kevin, that on average, Americans spend 1.69 hours a day checking and responding to emails. Okay, and in contrast, a separate study by Reboot Foundation found that people spend 82 minutes a day on social media. So if you look at the collective of, nearly 1 3/4 hours and nearly 1.5 hours on email and social media, there's way over 3.5 hours of your day just spent in front of a digital device. So, that obviously is problematic in some way or the other.
Yeah.
So while the study focused primarily on work emails, the pressure remains nevertheless that 57% of consumers felt pressure to reply to emails promptly. 52.8% respond even to non-urgent emails in less than 4 hours. And among women, 60.5% feel compelled to reply promptly, and 51.6% of men feel compelled to reply promptly. Consumers typically check their emails when they're bored, 75.7% of them, when they're on vacation, 69.3%, watching TV, we know the multi-screen environment, 63.5%, at night and over weekends, 58.9%, still in bed in the morning, 50%, and at night when they can't sleep, 46%. And interestingly, when spending time with family and friends, 45.1%. That disengaged family relationship.
Yeah.
But it's obvious to state that none of this contributes to peace of mind, Kevin. And 48.5% feel anxious about unread emails in the inbox, while 60% feel it's important to have no unread emails at all. And that's hugely concerning. The Reboot study found that over half of consumers say that their social media use contributes to anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem, at least somewhat in every single instance. And the most stressful email activities are crafting a formal response, responding quickly, and keeping an organized inbox. So it's not necessarily clear what this means for marketing emails. Is everybody going to push them away? Except that people are more likely to see them if they're checking their inbox 24/7. But from my point of view, Kevin, there surely is no way that consumers can engage positively with a brand when in a distressed state of mind. So if you're having to deal with these added pressures of the newsletters, the emailers, the inquiries, and you're in that negative state of mind, surely that's going to have a negative impact with your brand in terms of the brand association.
Yeah, Craig, mentioning COVID, the impact that it's having on business, you just mentioned email now, and you can sort of pick up the phone and phone just about any corporate, and every corporate is having a problem with email. Like it's just, and it's partly due to the fact that people don't know how to time manage themselves. They don't know how to manage how the influx of work, and they also don't build boundaries. People don't have boundaries, and because people are home now, and like this is one of the themes that come out from a coaching perspective is, oh yeah, I must get to it because I'm home, so they know I'm home, and my boss is just quickly going to send me this because I quickly have to get to it, even though it's already 6:30 and it's now I'm cooking. Let me quickly respond to the email. So from a personal perspective, people don't even build boundaries. So there's so much anxiety and there's so much wrong with this. Everything you're saying here, it
is. But there's Graham Codrington posted an amazing post on LinkedIn, probably in the last 2-3 days, if I'm not mistaken, where he's a little half minute clip, and he's basically built this little story around don't mess with my lunch hour, don't break my lunch hour kind of thing. And it's about allowing people to get into the discipline of saying, I have the right to stop. I have the right to take a break. I have the right to do something different. I have the right to be respected for the fact that I actually have a lunch hour, and a really great little clip. And it plays directly into this kind of conversation where you need to be able to take a step back and just let it be for a while. But leaders of business need to understand that, because it got to start at the top. It really, really has to.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with that. Craig, as we draw to the end of our today's conversation, what are the key takeaways that we can sort of sum up to our listeners for the session?
Yeah, Kevin, I think for me, there's only one set of takeaway points, and that really is to re-emphasize Nancy Klein's 10 components of the thinking environment. So let me quickly run through those again. The 10 components of the thinking environment defined as follows. Number 1, attention, listening with palpable respect and without interruption. Number 2, inclusive, incisive questions, removing assumptions that limit our ability to think for ourselves clearly and creatively. Number 3, ease, offering freedom from an internal rush or urgency. Number 4, appreciation, offering genuine acknowledgement of a person's qualities. Number 5, encouragement, giving courage to go to the cutting edge of ideas by moving beyond internal competition. Number 6, equality, treating each other as thinking peers, giving equal turns and attention. Number 7, feelings, allowing sufficient emotional release to restore thinking. Number 8, information, supplying the facts and dismantling denial. Number 9, diversity, welcoming divergent thinking and diverse group identities. And number 10, place, creating a physical environment that says back to people, you matter. And Kevin, what I really appreciate about the 10 principles, and I think I started touching on this a little while ago, is that one's really able to apply this approach not only in a work environment, but I genuinely believe that you should practice it at home with your family and with your friends as well. And I'm sure that the flow and outcome of any conversation will be substantially more constructive and more considered than if you've just dived into the conversation with a hint of perceived bias for an expected outcome.
Yeah, Craig, as you were like mentioning each line item there, I was applying it to how does this apply to our conversation? And every single one of them apply. And I was like, well, there we go. You know, we're already practicing this in such a profound way. It's, yeah, you know, I'm absolutely, I think that's so true. If you could actually make it part of your language, part of your behavior, part of your habit-formed behavior and how you do life, you know, it's that impacts your environment, your thought process, your mood, your everything on long term, right? So yeah, absolutely. I 100% love this and love that we could actually speak about it today. So Craig, what are we chatting about coming up for our next chat?
Yeah, Kevin, definitely working to secure one of the small businesses that were covered in the Hollard campaign. They're just so many to consider, but there's one in particular that I've got in mind, and I'll pursue that before the end of this week and make sure we have the gentleman with us next week. Really exciting opportunity.
Fantastic. Yeah. So guys, if you want to find out more about what we're going to be chatting about, you're going to have to join us every Thursday around lunchtime on ebizradio.com. Craig, thank you so much for chatting, and have a good one.
Thank you, Kevin. Great conversation again today. Thanks.
Cheers for now.
Bye.
Cool.